When I was buying a wedding gift for my daughter, an unknown number sent a chilling message. Don't go to the wedding, run. I called the number back, and what I heard shocked me and turned everything upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. The diamond earrings caught the light perfectly under the jeweler's loupe. I adjusted the magnification, studying each facet with the same intensity I'd once applied to construction blueprints. $15,000 was substantial, even for me. But Leona deserves something extraordinary for her wedding day. These earrings will be perfect for such a special occasion as a wedding, the salesperson said, her manicured fingers adjusting the velvet display. The woman had been patient with my examination, understanding that men of my generation approach such purchases methodically. Yes, my daughter's wedding. I want everything to be perfect. The words carried more weight than I intended. After losing Margaret 10 years ago, moments like these reminded me how much I wanted to get right. Leona had been through enough disappointments in her relationships. This time felt different with Carl. The boutique's classical music created a cocoon of refinement around us. Other customers moved quietly between displays, their voices hushed in reverence for the luxury surrounding them. I'd built Welch materials from nothing, and moments like this validated every difficult decision, every missed dinner, every weekend spent at construction sites instead of home. My phone buzzed against my chest pocket. I glanced at it absently, expecting another email about concrete deliveries or permit approvals. The message made my hands freeze above the jewelry case. Don't go to the wedding, run! The number was unfamiliar. I read the message again, then a third time. My fingers tightened around the phone's edges. The diamonds blurred as my focus shifted entirely to the screen's harsh blue glow. Sir, is everything all right? You look quite pale. The salesperson's voice seemed to come from underwater. Her concerned expression penetrated my confusion. I forced my breathing to steady. Just wedding nerves, I suppose. The lie came easily, a businessman's reflex to maintain composure under pressure. But inside, questions multiplied like cracks in concrete under freeze-thaw cycles. Who could write something like this? And where did they get this number? I dialed the mysterious number. The phone rang endlessly, each tone amplifying my anxiety. No voicemail, no answer, just the mechanical repetition of connection attempts. I tried again immediately, still nothing. The salesperson waited patiently while I completed the transaction. My signature on the credit card receipt looked shaky, uncertain. The gold pen felt foreign in my trembling fingers. She wrapped the earrings in tissue paper with practiced efficiency, placing them in the iconic Tiffany box with its perfect bow. I hope your daughter loves them, she said, handing me the small shopping bag. She will. The response was automatic. My thoughts remained fixed on the message, analyzing its implications like a structural engineer examining foundation problems. Someone knew about the wedding. Someone wanted me afraid. I walked toward the mall's main corridor, clutching the Tiffany bag against my side. Other shoppers moved around me in blissful ignorance while I scanned faces, searching for threats I couldn't identify. The Mall of America's crowds, usually comforting in their anonymity, now felt oppressive. Every stranger could be watching. Every phone could be documenting my movements. The gift that had given me such satisfaction moments ago now felt like evidence of my vulnerability. Someone knew my plans, my schedule, even my phone number. They wanted me to run from my daughter's wedding. I needed coffee. I needed time to think. The small cafe near the food court beckoned with its promise of normalcy and caffeine. Perhaps in the familiar ritual of ordering and sitting, I could make sense of this disruption to my carefully ordered world. The coffee grew cold while I stirred it obsessively, watching the cream swirl in patterns that reminded me of concrete mixers. The Tiffany bag sat on the table beside my elbow, its presence both reassuring and mocking. $15,000 for earrings, and now someone was telling me not to give them to my daughter. Families occupied nearby tables, their children's laughter creating a soundtrack of normalcy I couldn't access. My phone lay face up on the table, its dark screen reflecting my anxious face. I'd checked it 17 times in the past hour, willing it to ring so I could demand answers from whoever had shattered my peaceful afternoon. The second buzz made me jump. Another message from the same unknown number. I'll explain everything later, but don't go home today. Trust me. My logical mind rebelled against following instructions from a stranger. 68 years of business experience had taught me to verify sources, demand credentials, require proof before making decisions. But something deeper, an instinct I'd learned to trust during decades of construction negotiations, whispered that I should listen. I dialed the number again. The endless ringing mocked my desperation for answers. Whoever was sending these messages had no intention of immediate communication. They were controlling the timing, forcing me to react rather than respond strategically. "Another coffee, sir?" The young server appeared at my elbow, pot in hand, concern creasing her features. "Make it a double shot." The caffeine wouldn't help my nerves, but the familiar routine of ordering provided temporary anchor in the chaos of uncertainty. My reflection in the cafe window showed a man I barely recognized. The confident businessman who'd entered Tiffany & Co. 2 hours ago had been replaced by someone hunched over a phone, jumping at electronic sounds. Margaret used to tease me about my need to control every variable in my environment. Now, variables were controlling me. The Lincoln Navigator sat in the parking garage 3 levels down. I could drive home to my house in Minnetonka, pour myself a proper whiskey, and dismiss these messages as pranks or wrong numbers. Leona's wedding was tomorrow evening. I had final preparations to oversee, vendors to confirm, a father of the bride's speech to review one last time. Instead, I found myself dialing the Hilton Minneapolis downtown. "I need a room for one night. Yes, for today." The reservation agent's efficiency impressed me. Within minutes, I had confirmation for room 815, a business-class accommodation with city views and high-speed internet. The decision felt both impulsive and inevitable. Something about that voice in my head, the one that had guided me through profitable real estate investments and away from problematic partnerships, insisted that trusting these mysterious warnings was the right choice. I deliberately avoided calling Leona or Carl. Worrying them before I understood the situation would only create additional chaos. Better to spend one night in a hotel, gather information, and approach tomorrow's wedding with clarity rather than confusion. The drive downtown took 37 minutes through Friday afternoon traffic. I kept checking my rearview mirror, though I wouldn't have recognized surveillance if it existed. Construction sites and office buildings blurred past while I replayed the day's events, searching for patterns or explanations that remained frustratingly elusive. The hotel's valet took my keys with professional discretion. The lobby's marble floors and crystal chandeliers reminded me of the Tiffany store, another environment where money purchased comfort and service. I checked in using my credit card, accepted the key card, and rode the elevator to the 8th floor in silence. Room 815 felt enormous and sterile. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the Minneapolis skyline, but the familiar landmarks provided no comfort. I unpacked my emergency overnight bag, hanging my spare suit in the closet with mechanical precision. The hotel room's silence pressed against my eardrums like deep water. I'd ordered room service twice, watched 3 news programs, and taken a shower that lasted 43 minutes. Nothing distracted me from the phone sitting on the nightstand, its screen dark and accusatory. 7 attempts to call the mysterious number had yielded nothing but endless ringing. Whoever was behind these warnings controlled our communication completely. They would contact me when they chose, not when I demanded answers. The steak arrived perfectly cooked, accompanied by a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan that cost more than most people earned in a week. I signed the bill mechanically, tipping the room service waiter enough to ensure he wouldn't remember me as anything other than generous. "Just leave it on the table, thank you." My voice sounded hollow in the spacious room. The waiter's departure left me alone with my thoughts and growing paranoia. Outside the windows, Minneapolis glittered with Friday night energy. Couples walked hand in hand toward restaurants and theaters, living normal lives unburdened by cryptic warnings and unexplained fears. I envied their ignorance while nursing my whiskey, watching traffic patterns 8 floors below. The wedding was less than 20 hours away. Leona would expect me at the venue by noon for photographs and final preparations. The banquet hall on the Mississippi River had cost me $47,000, not including flowers, music, or catering. Everything was arranged, confirmed, and paid for. Yet, someone wanted me to run from it all. My phone showed 11:47 p.m. when I attempted my 8th call to the mysterious number. The familiar pattern of unanswered rings had become almost meditative, a ritual of frustration I repeated every hour like clockwork. At 11:50 p.m., the phone rang. I answered on the first ring, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hello? Arthur? This is Henry Burke. Sorry for the mystery, but I had to be certain. The voice hit me like recognition lightning. Henry Burke, my former business partner, the man I'd trusted with half my company until his gambling addiction destroyed our partnership 8 years ago. We'd parted ways acrimoniously, lawyers mediating the dissolution of what had once been genuine friendship. Henry, after 8 years, what's happening? The questions tumbled out before I could control them. Relief at finally having answers competed with confusion about why Henry had contacted me through anonymous messages. Today I was at Lawyer Stevens's office for my aunt's estate matter. Henry's voice carried the weight of someone delivering terrible news. Arthur, I overheard something about your daughter's wedding, about you. The whiskey glass trembled in my free hand. Stevens was a prominent Minneapolis attorney, the kind who handled wealthy families' legal affairs with discretion and efficiency. What could Henry have overheard that warranted cryptic warnings and hotel room isolation? What did you hear? The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. Not over the phone, too dangerous. Meet me tomorrow morning at the Guthrie Theater, the bridge overlooking the river, 10 o'clock. Come alone. And Arthur? Henry's paws stretched uncomfortably. Bring everything important. Papers, passwords, anything you'd need if you couldn't go home for a while. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone's blank screen, my reflection distorted in its dark surface. Outside, Minneapolis continued its Friday night celebrations while I sat in an expensive hotel room contemplating the destruction of everything I'd built. Tomorrow was supposed to be Leona's wedding day. Instead, it might be the day I learned why someone wanted me to disappear. The phone's weight felt enormous in my grip as Henry's voice echoed through the hotel room's silence. 8 years of separation melted away, leaving only the urgency in his tone and the dread building in my chest. I stood up from the bed, pacing toward the window where Minneapolis sparkled below like scattered diamonds. Henry, what exactly did you overhear? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The businessman in me needed facts, specifics, evidence before accepting what my instincts already feared. I heard her saying, "The old man barely leaves the house anyway. We'll find witnesses about memory problems." Henry's words struck like hammer blows. Arthur, your daughter was discussing guardianship procedures with Stevens. She mentioned having you declared incompetent after the wedding. That's impossible. My Leona would never... The protest died in my throat. I grabbed the hotel notepad and pen, my hands shaking as I wrote down Henry's exact words. The businessman's reflex to document everything kicked in automatically. I wish I was wrong, but I sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes. She and that fiancé of hers discussed it in detail. Henry's voice dropped lower. Carl kept talking about the company's value, asking about business transfer procedures, something about moving assets before the competency hearing. The notepad slipped from my fingers. I sank into the desk chair, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. Room 815's luxury surroundings blurred as I processed the implications. My daughter. My own daughter was planning to steal my life's work. What else did they say? The question came out as a whisper. Arthur, I wouldn't call if I wasn't certain. Your daughter is planning to sell your business. Henry's paws stretched uncomfortably. I saw them with legal documents. This isn't just talk, Arthur. They have a timeline. I stood again, walked to the window, pressed my palm against the cool glass. The city below continued its Friday night celebrations while my world collapsed floor by floor. How could I have been so blind? Every concerned comment about my forgetfulness, every suggestion that I seemed tired, every offer to help with the business suddenly revealed itself as preparation for this moment. Thank you for warning me. The words felt inadequate. Henry, I know we ended badly, but maybe old partners should still look out for each other, he interrupted. We had our problems, but I never forgot what you did for me early on. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. I poured a double whiskey with trembling hands, the Macallan burning my throat as memories cascaded through my mind. Leona asking about insurance policies last Christmas. Carl's frequent questions about company valuation. Their recent conversations about my declining health, despite my excellent physical condition. They mentioned having medical evaluations scheduled, Henry continued. said something about Stevens knowing the right doctors, ones who would cooperate with the right diagnosis. The glass shattered against the hotel room's marble floor. I stared at the amber liquid spreading across expensive stone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. They had it all planned. The wedding was just a celebration before destroying my life. Henry, I need to know everything, every word you heard. For the next 20 minutes, Henry recounted the conversation with devastating precision. Legal documents were already prepared. Medical professionals had been contacted. Financial advisors were standing by to liquidate assets. My daughter and her fiancé had orchestrated a comprehensive plan to steal everything I'd built over 40 years. I filled 3 pages with notes, documenting every detail like preparing for the most important business negotiation of my life, because that's exactly what this was, a fight for my company, my independence, my very identity. Arthur, there's something else. Henry's voice carried new weight. They mentioned moving quickly after the honeymoon, something about you having an episode at the wedding reception, becoming confused or agitated. They plan to use that as evidence. The hotel room felt like a trap. Tomorrow evening, I was supposed to walk Leona down the aisle, smile for photographs, give a heartfelt father of the bride speech. Instead, I would be participating in the setup for my own destruction. I set down the phone and stared at my reflection in the dark window. A 70-year-old man looked back, but behind those eyes burned the same determination that had built Welch Materials from nothing. They wanted to destroy Arthur Welch. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The broken glass crunched under my shoes as I paced the hotel room, my notepad filled with Henry's devastating revelations. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced through 40 years of memories, re-examining every interaction with Leona and Carl through this new lens of betrayal. My phone's photo gallery became a catalog of evidence I'd been too blind to see. Last Christmas dinner, there was Carl casually asking about the company's insurance policies. Leona's birthday party in March, she'd mentioned my forgetful moments to 3 different relatives. Every family gathering now revealed itself as intelligence gathering. The digital clock showed 2:17 a.m. when I scrolled to a photo from Easter dinner. Leona was whispering something to Carl while I carved the ham, both of them looking at me with expressions I'd interpreted as concern. Now I recognize them as calculation. How could I have been so blind? Carl always asked about the company's value, the real estate holdings, the machinery worth. Leona lately mentioned my forgetful moments so often I'd started wondering if I really was declining. Every casual comment about retirement, every suggestion that I seemed tired, every offer to help with business decisions. It was all preparation. I grabbed a fresh piece of hotel stationery and began documenting patterns. Carl's questions about company insurance last December, Leona's comments about my confusion during their engagement party, their frequent suggestions that I should consider slowing down, maybe think about transferring some responsibilities. The whiskey helped steady my hands as I wrote. Each revelation felt like discovering termites in a foundation I'd thought was solid. They'd been systematically undermining my credibility for months, maybe years, preparing witnesses for their eventual competency challenge. At 4:33 a.m., I found the photograph that made everything crystal clear. Leona and Carl at my birthday party 2 months ago, both looking at their phones while I opened presents. In the background, barely visible, was a business card on the coffee table, Stevens' law firm. They'd been planning this since before they announced their engagement. Dawn light crept through the hotel windows as I reviewed my notes, 23 instances of suspicious behavior, 14 questions about company finances, 7 comments about my supposed memory problems. The pattern was undeniable once you knew what to look for. Maybe I really had started seeming like a burden to them. The doubt crept in despite the evidence. Carl was young, ambitious, probably saw an old man standing between him and financial security. Leona had always been practical, perhaps too practical. When had love for her father become an obstacle to overcome? Every family dinner, every casual question about retirement, every concerned look. It was all preparation for today's revelation. They'd turned my own daughter into an executioner, and she'd accepted the role willingly. The phone rang at 6:18 a.m. Room service, confirming my breakfast order. Coffee, eggs, Benedict, fresh fruit. The normalcy of the conversation felt surreal against the backdrop of family betrayal. I'd eaten thousands of business breakfasts over 4 decades, but this morning I was preparing for war against my own blood. I showered methodically, choosing my most conservative business suit. Today required every advantage, including the psychological armor of professional appearance. In the mirror, I saw not a vulnerable old man, but a seasoned negotiator preparing for the most important deal of his life. The checkout process took 8 minutes. I paid cash for incidentals, maintaining financial discretion. No credit card trails for Henry's warnings or my defensive preparations. If Leona and Carl were tracking my movements, they'd find gaps. Downtown Minneapolis was awakening as I drove toward Stevens' office building. Early commuters filled coffee shops and lobbies, beginning another ordinary Friday. None of them knew that Arthur Welch was driving toward confirmation of his daughter's betrayal. The elevator to Stevens' law firm rose smoothly past 14 floors of Minneapolis's professional elite. I'd been in this building dozens of times over the years, negotiating contracts and reviewing legal documents. Today felt different. Today I was an investigator seeking evidence of my own destruction. Stevens' receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mr. Welch, how nice to see you. Are you here for the Jacobson contract review?" "Actually, I'd like to speak with Robert about my will." I kept my voice casual, businesslike. "And I'm curious about some other legal matters my daughter mentioned." The waiting room's leather chairs and mahogany tables exuded expensive competence. Financial magazines fanned across side tables, their headlines about market trends and investment strategies. I'd built my wealth following advice from publications like these. Now I was fighting to keep it from my own family. "Arthur, wonderful to see you." Robert Stevens emerged from his office, hand extended in professional greeting. Tall, distinguished, silver-haired. The kind of lawyer wealthy Minneapolis families trusted with their most sensitive affairs. His office overlooked the Mississippi River, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the same waterway where tomorrow's wedding reception was scheduled. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Robert, I want to review my will. And who else has been asking you similar questions?" I settled into the chair across from his desk, adopting the casual tone of friendly curiosity. Stevens paused, his professional smile flickering slightly. "Well, your daughter was interested in guardianship procedures, said she was worried about your health, wanted to understand the legal options if—" "I see. What documents did she request?" The question came out sharper than intended. I softened my tone. "She mentioned something about protective measures, forms for incompetency declaration, requirements for medical evaluations." Stevens pulled a file from his desk drawer. She seemed very thorough about understanding the process. My hands remained steady as I accepted the photocopied documents, page after page of legal procedures for stripping someone of their independence, medical evaluation requirements, asset transfer protocols, guardianship appointment processes. It was a complete roadmap for destroying someone's life. How thorough. She's always been detail-oriented. The comment masked my horror at seeing the plan laid out so systematically. "Did she say anything about timing?" Stevens hesitated, clearly uncomfortable discussing one client with another, even family. "She mentioned wanting to understand the process thoroughly before any medical decline became apparent." Translation: before they manufactured evidence of my incompetence. "And Carl? Was he part of these discussions?" "Your daughter's fiancé had many questions about business transfer procedures, asset protection during legal proceedings." Stevens flipped through his notes. He seemed quite knowledgeable about corporate valuation methods. The room felt arctic despite the morning sunlight streaming through windows. They'd done their homework. Legal procedures, medical requirements, business valuation, asset protection. Every aspect of their theft had been researched and prepared. "Robert, I'd like copies of everything related to guardianship law. For my own understanding, of course." I pulled out my wallet, extracting $500 bills. "And I'd prefer to handle this transaction privately." Stevens accepted the cash without comment, making photocopies of relevant statutes and procedures. Professional discretion was part of his service, especially when paid in untraceable currency. 20 minutes later, I walked toward the parking garage with a manila envelope full of evidence. Legal documents outlining exactly how my daughter planned to steal my life's work. Medical evaluation procedures they'd used to declare me incompetent. asset transfer protocols for liquidating Welch materials. The Lincoln Navigator's engine purred to life as I sat in the parking structure, reading through the papers one more time. Everything Henry had told me was confirmed in black and white. My daughter and her fiancé had orchestrated a comprehensive plan to destroy me, and they'd scheduled it to begin immediately after their honeymoon. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed Arthur Welch would be a passive victim. They had no idea that the man who'd built a construction empire from nothing was about to remind them exactly what he was capable of when threatened. The familiar weight of my house keys felt foreign as I unlocked the front door at exactly noon. The manila envelope containing Stephen's documents remained hidden in my briefcase, alongside the Tiffany bag that had started this nightmare 20 hours ago. I hung my jacket on the designated hook with deliberate normalcy, setting my briefcase beside the hall table. "Dad, where were you? We were worried. You didn't answer your calls." Leona rushed from the kitchen, her face a perfect mask of concern. Behind her, Carl emerged more slowly, his eyes studying my face for signs of confusion or weakness. "I went to a hotel. Couldn't sleep at home, before the wedding." I let my voice trail off, projecting mild embarrassment rather than the cold rage burning in my chest. "Sometimes the house feels too quiet since your mother passed." Carl's eyes sharpened. "That's somewhat unusual, Arthur. Maybe you should talk to a doctor about sleep problems." His tone carried practiced sympathy, but I caught the calculating gleam beneath. "Yes, Dad, we're concerned about you. Lately you seem forgetful." Leona touched my arm with manufactured tenderness. "You left your phone here. We tried calling all night." I patted my pockets with exaggerated confusion. "Did I? How silly of me. The performance required every ounce of my business experience. Play the part they expected while gathering intelligence for my counterattack. Have either of you seen my keys? I could have sworn I put them." I made a show of checking the hall table, my jacket pockets, even looking under magazines. The keys were in my hand the entire time. Carl and Leona exchanged the kind of significant look that confirmed everything Henry had told me. They were documenting my episodes for future medical evaluations. "Right here, Dad." Leona pointed to the obvious location on the counter. "You set them down when you came in." "Of course. Thank you, sweetheart." I smiled gratefully while my mind cataloged their reactions. Carl had pulled out his phone, probably making notes about my supposed confusion. Leona was watching my hands for tremors, my eyes for signs of disorientation. I moved to the kitchen and began my usual tea ritual, the familiar motions providing cover while I listened to their whispered conversation near the living room entrance. "Getting worse," Carl murmured. "The evaluation next week will confirm it," Leona replied. "Good thing we have Stephen's paperwork ready." They had already scheduled my mental competency evaluation. The trap was closing faster than I'd imagined. "Dad, why don't you sit down? You look tired." Leona guided me toward my favorite armchair like I was an invalid. "Carl and I can handle the wedding preparations." "Actually, I wanted to discuss something important." I settled into the chair, adopting the tone of a man seeking advice from younger, more capable family members. "I've been thinking about the company lately. What will happen when I'm too old to manage everything?" Both of them leaned forward with predatory interest. "Don't worry about that now, Arthur." Carl's voice carried false reassurance. "We'll help you when the time comes. But what if something happens to me? What if I become unable to make decisions?" I let vulnerability creep into my voice. "I trust both of you completely, but I worry about the complexity of the business." "Dad, you don't need to worry about any of that." Leona's eyes gleamed with poorly concealed excitement. "Carl has been studying your contracts, your client relationships. We understand the business better than you think." "Really? You've studied my contracts?" I feigned surprise while mentally recording her admission. "That's very thoughtful, but some of those arrangements are quite complex." "Actually, I've identified several opportunities for consolidation," Carl interrupted. "Your company could be much more profitable with proper management. I even know potential buyers who are ready to pay exceptional prices." The audacity was breathtaking. They were so confident in their plan that Carl was openly discussing selling my life's work. I sipped my tea and nodded thoughtfully, playing the role of an aging businessman grateful for young expertise. My phone buzzed with a text message, Both Leona and Carl watched intently as I fumbled with the device, deliberately holding it at the wrong angle and squinting at the screen. "Having trouble reading it, Dad?" Leona asked with false concern. "These screens are so small." I handed her the phone. "Could you tell me what it says?" The message was from Henry. "Everything okay? Stay strong." "Just a spam message," Leona lied smoothly, deleting the text before handing back my phone. They were already controlling my communications. I stood slowly, stretching my back with theatrical discomfort. "I think I'll rest before tonight's rehearsal dinner. This has been an exhausting day." "Good idea, Dad. You need your strength for tomorrow." Leona kissed my cheek while Carl watched from across the room, probably timing how long my confusion episodes lasted. I walked toward my study, my footsteps deliberately unsteady. Behind me, I heard them begin another whispered conference about my declining condition and their accelerated timeline. The study door closed with a soft click, finally giving me sanctuary to drop the performance. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, but this time it was rage, not confusion, that made them tremble. The study's familiar walls provided temporary refuge from my performance of decline. I activated my phone's recording app, testing the audio quality by tapping the desk and whispering test phrases. Clear sound, no distortion, perfect for capturing confessions. My business instincts took over as I planned the evidence collection strategy. Leona and Carl believed they were dealing with a confused old man. That perception was now my greatest weapon. They would speak freely around someone they considered mentally compromised. I slipped the phone into my shirt pocket, microphone positioned upward, and returned to the living room where they continued their whispered planning session. "Feeling better, Dad?" Leona looked up from a stack of papers they'd been reviewing, papers that definitely weren't wedding-related based on the legal letterhead I glimpsed. "Much better. Actually, I wanted to continue our conversation about the company." I settled back into my chair, adopting the tone of someone seeking reassurance. "Sometimes I think I'm getting too old for business. What will happen to the company when I can't handle the complexity anymore?" Carl leaned forward eagerly. "Don't worry, Arthur. Leona and I will help. I've studied all your contracts, the Morrison project, the Henderson development, even the equipment leasing arrangements with Caterpillar." The casual mention of specific contracts stunned me. Those files were locked in my office safe. How had he accessed them? "You know about the Henderson development?" I let my voice sound impressed rather than alarmed. "That's very complicated. The environmental permits alone." "Already reviewed them," Carl said proudly. "Plus the profit projections, the timeline for completion, everything. You've built an incredible company, but it could be even more profitable with proper management." Leona nodded enthusiastically. "Dad, maybe you should work less. We'll take care of everything. You've earned a rest." "Could you really manage such a large company?" I made my voice sound both hopeful and doubtful. "Of course! I even know buyers who are ready to pay a very good price." Carl's excitement was making him careless. "Consolidated Construction has been interested in your client list for years. They've offered $47 million for the whole operation." My blood turned to ice. $47 million was roughly 60% of the company's actual value. They were planning to sell my life's work at a devastating loss, probably taking a substantial finder's fee for themselves. $47 million, I repeated slowly, as if trying to process the number. "That sounds like a lot of money." "It is, Arthur, enough to keep you comfortable for the rest of your life." Carl's patronizing tone made me want to throw him through the window. "Leona and I would handle all the business details. You could relax, maybe do some traveling." "Where would I travel?" I asked, with the innocent curiosity of someone whose world was shrinking. "Somewhere warm," Leona suggested. "Maybe a nice assisted living community in Arizona. They have excellent facilities there." Assisted living. They were planning to warehouse me in some institutional setting while they looted my assets. The phone in my pocket captured every word of their casual discussion about destroying my independence. "That sounds lovely." I smiled vacantly while imagining their eventual imprisonment. "But what about my house? I've lived here for 35 years." "Don't worry about the house, Dad. We'll handle selling it." Leona's voice carried the patience of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. "These decisions are too complex for you to worry about anymore." Carl pulled out his phone and began scrolling through contacts. "Actually, I should call the evaluation specialist, Dr. Morrison said he could move your appointment to Tuesday if necessary. Dr. Morrison. They'd already arranged for my mental competency evaluation with a specific doctor, probably one they'd bought or pressured. The timeline was accelerating beyond even Henry's warnings. What evaluation? I asked, with perfectly feigned confusion. Just a routine checkup, Dad. Dr. Morrison specializes in age-related cognitive changes. Leona's euphemism was almost elegant. We want to make sure you're healthy. That's very thoughtful. I stood slowly, shuffling toward the kitchen like an old man needing tea. You two are such good children, taking care of everything. Behind me, I heard Carl dialing Dr. Morrison's number. The phone in my pocket captured every word as he discussed moving my cognitive evaluation to Tuesday morning, 2 days after the wedding. They weren't even waiting for the honeymoon to begin their assault. The kitchen provided perfect acoustics as I prepared another cup of tea with deliberately shaky hands. Their conversation carried clearly from the living room. Tuesday works perfectly, Carl said into his phone. Yes, the family is very concerned about his declining condition. Memory problems, confusion, difficulty with complex decisions. No, he won't resist. He trusts us completely. The water boiled as Leona added her voice to the planning. We should have the guardianship papers filed by Wednesday. Stephen said the court date could be as early as Friday if we present compelling medical evidence. 1 week. They were planning to strip away my independence, sell my company, and institutionalize me within 1 week of their wedding day. The audacity was breathtaking, but it was also their fatal mistake. They'd revealed their entire timeline, their methods, even their corrupt doctor's name. I returned to the living room carrying my tea with both hands, the picture of elderly frailty. I couldn't help but overhear, "You're arranging a doctor's appointment for me? Just a checkup, Dad." Leona's smile was radiant with false affection. "We love you so much. We want to make sure you're properly cared for." The recording app continued capturing evidence as I nodded gratefully, playing the role of a trusting father while my mind calculated the precise nature of their eventual downfall. They wanted to prove Arthur Welch was mentally incompetent? Tomorrow, at their wedding reception, they would discover exactly how sharp his mind really was. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only comes after sleepless planning. I'd spent Sunday reviewing every recorded conversation, organizing documents, and preparing my counterattack with the methodical precision that had built Welch Materials from nothing. Today was execution day. The drive to my office took 23 minutes through morning traffic. I carried 2 briefcases, one with the usual business documents, another with evidence that would destroy my daughter's future. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was driving to save my company from my own blood. My assistant Margaret, I'd named her after my late wife, looked up from her computer with professional concern. "Mr. Welch, I didn't expect you today. Isn't the wedding this weekend?" "Saturday evening, yes, but I have some urgent business to handle first." I unlocked my office door, already planning the morning's delicate operations. "Margaret, could you clear my schedule until noon? I have some sensitive calls to make." The first call went to Blackwood Investigations, a firm I'd used for employee background checks. "James, this is Arthur Welch. I need comprehensive financial background checks on 2 individuals, Carl Fraser and Dr. Morrison. Yes, I'll pay the rush charges." Within an hour, James called back with devastating information. Carl had gambling debts totaling $340,000 to 3 different casinos. Dr. Morrison had been investigated twice for insurance fraud, though never convicted. My daughter had chosen her conspirators poorly. The second call was more personal. "Margaret, I know this is short notice, but I'd like to invite some additional family members to Leona's wedding. Could you help me contact them?" "Of course, Mr. Welch. Who should I call?" "My sister Margaret in Phoenix, brother Robert in Chicago, all the cousins. I want the whole family there." I paused for effect. "This will be a very special celebration. They shouldn't miss it." Margaret's efficiency impressed me as always. Within 2 hours, she'd contacted 37 relatives across 6 states. Most were shocked by the last-minute invitation, but family loyalty trumped inconvenience. They would all attend. The third call required more delicate handling. "Thompson Audio Visual, this is Arthur Welch. I'm hosting a large family event this Saturday and need professional sound equipment. Yes, wireless microphones, a mixing board, speakers powerful enough for 200 guests. Money is no object." "What kind of event, Mr. Welch?" "A wedding reception. but I also want to give a very important speech. The whole family needs to hear every word clearly. By Wednesday afternoon, my trap was set with precision that would have impressed a military strategist. The venue had been expanded to accommodate 60 additional guests. Professional audio equipment was scheduled for delivery Saturday morning. Dr. Morrison's fraudulent background was documented. Carl's gambling debts were verified and photographed. Most importantly, I'd contacted Lawrence Chen, Minneapolis's most respected elder law attorney, to draft new legal documents. My will now left everything to charity, with explicit language stating that any attempts to challenge my mental competency would result in criminal prosecution for fraud. Thursday brought the final piece of my puzzle. Leona, I've been thinking about your wedding gift. She looked up from her laptop, probably reviewing guardianship documents. The earrings are beautiful, Dad. You don't need to give us anything else. Actually, I want to give a speech at the reception, a proper father of the bride speech about family, trust, and the future. I smiled with paternal warmth while watching her reaction. I've invited some additional family members too. Aunt Margaret, Uncle Robert, all the cousins. This should be a celebration the whole family remembers. Leona's face went pale. But Dad, we planned an intimate ceremony. Nonsense. This is my daughter's wedding. I want everyone to witness this momentous occasion. I patted her hand affectionately. Don't worry about the cost. I've already expanded the venue and arranged for professional audio equipment. Everyone will hear my speech perfectly. Carl appeared in the doorway, obviously having overheard our conversation. Arthur, maybe a smaller gathering would be less overwhelming for you? Overwhelming? This is the happiest day of my life. I stood and embraced them both with theatrical emotion. My daughter is marrying a wonderful man. The whole family will be together, and I get to share my thoughts about love, loyalty, and what family really means. What will you say in your speech? Leona asked weakly. Oh, I have so many stories to tell. About trust between family members, about honesty in relationships, about people who pretend to care while planning betrayal. I smiled benevolently. Don't worry, dear. I've been preparing for weeks. It will be a speech no one ever forgets. Carl gripped Leona's arm, both of them recognizing the threat they couldn't identify. Their wedding, intended as a celebration before my destruction, was about to become the stage for their public humiliation. The whole family will be there? Carl's voice carried barely controlled panic. Everyone important, I confirmed cheerfully. Aunts, uncles, cousins, business associates, even some old friends I haven't seen in years. We'll have nearly 200 guests to witness this special day. I walked to the window overlooking my garden, where Margaret had planted roses 30 years ago. Saturday evening, in front of everyone who mattered, I would prove that Arthur Welch's mind was sharp enough to destroy anyone foolish enough to betray him. The trap was set. The audience was confirmed. The evidence was prepared. All that remained was the execution. Riverview Banquet Hall stretched elegantly along the Mississippi's eastern bank, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the water I'd known since childhood. I arrived at precisely 2:06 p.m., carrying my briefcase and the Tiffany bag that had started this journey 8 days ago. The irony felt appropriate, presenting my daughter with $15,000 earrings before destroying her future. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across white tablecloths and fresh flowers, creating the romantic atmosphere Leona had dreamed of for months. Wedding guests mingled with champagne glasses, their laughter echoing across marble floors while they celebrated what they believed was a joyous union. None of them knew they were about to witness a public execution. Mr. Welch, a young man in a black suit, approached with professional courtesy. I'm David from Thompson Audio Visual. Your sound system is ready for testing. I followed him to the head table where wireless microphones sat beside elegant place settings. The main speaker system was positioned strategically throughout the hall, ensuring my voice would reach every corner during the revelation. No one would miss a single word. The microphones connect automatically to your phone, David explained, adjusting the mixing board. Just activate the connection, and anything you play will broadcast through all speakers. Perfect. I tested the microphone briefly, hearing my voice amplify clearly across the empty hall. The speech I'm giving tonight will be quite detailed. Everyone needs to hear it perfectly. Aunt Margaret approached as the sound technician departed, her face radiant with the joy of family reunion. Arthur, how are you holding up? Leona looks absolutely beautiful. We haven't seen each other in months. Thank you for coming. Today will be an unforgettable day. I embraced her warmly, genuinely grateful for her presence despite the coming storm. I wanted the whole family here to witness something very important. Uncle Robert appeared with several cousins, all expressing delight at the unexpected invitation. Their genuine happiness made my heart ache, knowing I was about to shatter the family's peace forever. But justice demanded witnesses, and family deserved truth. Arthur, you seem quiet today. Are you feeling all right? Leona approached in her stunning white gown, every inch the radiant bride. Her concern appeared genuine, though I now recognized the calculating assessment beneath her loving daughter facade. Just emotional, sweetheart. A father doesn't marry off his only daughter every day. I kissed her cheek, tasting the salt of my own hidden tears. Despite everything, she was still my little girl. The betrayal hurt more than I'd imagined possible. Carl worked the room with practiced charm, shaking hands and accepting congratulations from relatives who admired his apparent devotion to family business. Arthur's been so generous, I overheard him telling my brother Robert. We're lucky to have such a successful family enterprise to build upon. The photography session required careful emotional control. Posing for traditional family pictures, I smiled beside my daughter and her groom, while secretly documenting the last moments before their world collapsed. These photographs would become evidence of their final innocent happiness. Mr. Welch, would you like to give your speech after dinner service? The wedding coordinator appeared with clipboard and professional efficiency. Absolutely. I have quite a lot to say about my daughter and her new husband. I checked my briefcase discreetly, ensuring all evidence remains secure. Please make sure the microphones are live. This will be a speech the family remembers forever. During dinner, I excused myself to the men's room for final preparation. In the privacy of a marble-walled sanctuary, I opened my briefcase and reviewed the documents one last time. Legal guardianship papers, recorded conversations revealing the conspiracy, financial background checks exposing Carl's gambling debts, Dr. Morrison's fraudulent history. Everything was ready. Everything was documented. Everything would be revealed. The reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man transformed by betrayal into an instrument of justice. Arthur Welch, the loving father, was about to become Arthur Welch, the avenging businessman. The same ruthless precision that had built an empire would now destroy the daughter who tried to steal it. I returned to the head table as dessert service concluded. 200 family members and friends chatted happily over coffee and champagne, completely unaware that their celebration was about to become a courtroom. Leona and Carl sat beside me, glowing with newlywed happiness and secret anticipation of inherited wealth. The wedding coordinator approached with a gentle tap on my shoulder. Mr. Welch, whenever you're ready for your speech. I stood slowly, accepting the wireless microphone with steady hands. Conversations gradually quieted as guests noticed the father of the bride preparing to speak. Expectant faces turned toward me with warm anticipation of traditional wedding sentiments about love, family, and future happiness. Instead, they were about to learn what happened when someone betrayed Arthur Welch. I approached the microphone stand as the hall fell into respectful silence. 200 witnesses. Professional audio equipment. Comprehensive evidence. Perfect acoustics for maximum impact. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Dear friends and family. Dear friends and family. My voice carried clearly through Thompson's professional sound system, reaching every corner of the elegant reception hall. 200 faces turned toward me with warm expectation, champagne glasses raised in anticipation of traditional wedding toasts about love and happiness. Today is indeed a special day. A day of truth, of family, of discovering who people really are when they believe no one is watching. I smiled benevolently while Leona and Carl exchanged confused glances beside me. As father of the bride, I want to share some important revelations about marriage, trust, and the sacred bonds between family members. Aunt Margaret beamed proudly from her table, clearly expecting heartwarming stories about Leona's childhood and hopes for her future. Uncle Robert raised his champagne glass in preparation for the traditional toast. None of them anticipated witnessing the destruction of everything they thought they knew about their family. Marriage requires absolute honesty between partners, I continued, pulling my phone from my jacket pocket. It demands loyalty, respect, and the kind of trust that allows two people to build a life together. Unfortunately, some people view marriage differently, as an opportunity for financial gain rather than emotional partnership. The crowd murmured appreciative agreement, while Leona's smile began to falter. Carl shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sensing something dangerous in my tone, but unable to identify the threat. Before I share my hopes for the newlyweds, I think everyone should understand exactly what kind of partnership we're celebrating today. I connected my phone to the audio system, watching the connection icon appear on screen. I recently discovered some interesting conversations between my daughter and her new husband. Silence fell across the reception hall like a heavy curtain. 200 guests leaned forward with sudden attention, sensing drama about to unfold. At the head table, Leona gripped Carl's arm with growing panic. "Dad, what are you doing?" she whispered urgently. "Sharing the truth, sweetheart. Isn't that what families do?" I pressed play on the first recording. Carl's voice filled the hall with devastating clarity. "The old man won't understand the business complexity anymore. We'll sell everything and live beautifully while he drools in some nursing home." Gasps echoed throughout the reception hall. Guests stared in shock at the head table, where Carl's face had gone completely white. Leona covered her mouth with trembling hands as her own voice emerged from the speakers. "Dad barely leaves the house anyway. We'll find witnesses about his memory problems." "This is what my dear children planned," I announced with calm precision. "To declare me mentally incompetent, steal my company, and lock me away in assisted living while they liquidated 40 years of my life's work." Chaos erupted across the reception hall. Family members stood up from their tables, shouting questions and accusations. Aunt Margaret's face showed pure horror as she processed the evidence of her niece's betrayal. Uncle Robert slammed his champagne glass on the table, amber liquid splashing across white linen. "This is all a misunderstanding," Carl shouted, rising from his chair with desperate aggression. "Arthur's confused. He's mixing up conversations." "Let me clear up any confusion," I replied, producing the manila envelope from my briefcase. "These are legal documents my daughter requested from lawyer Stevens. Guardianship procedures, incompetency declarations, asset transfer protocols, a complete roadmap for destroying someone's independence." I held up page after page of evidence while guests stared in stunned silence. The happy wedding celebration had transformed into a courtroom where judgment was being delivered with businesslike efficiency. Furthermore, I continued, I discovered that Carl has gambling debts totaling $340,000 to multiple casinos. Their plan was to sell my $78 million company for $47 million, keeping the difference to pay his creditors. "You destroyed our lives, you crazy old fool," Carl screamed, all pretense of charm evaporating. "We were trying to help you." "Help me?" I laughed without humor. "You scheduled my mental competency evaluation for Tuesday morning, 2 days after your honeymoon. Dr. Morrison, your chosen evaluator, has been investigated twice for insurance fraud." More gasps and horrified whispers swept through the crowd. Several elderly relatives stood up and walked toward the exit, unable to stomach the revelation that family members could plan such betrayal. "Therefore," I announced with finality, "I changed my will yesterday. My estate now goes entirely to Minneapolis Children's Hospital. My daughter and her husband will inherit nothing except the consequences of their greed." Leona burst into tears, her wedding makeup streaming down her cheeks in dark rivulets. "Dad, please, we can explain everything. It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I set down the microphone and looked across the reception hall where half the guests were already gathering their belongings to leave. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending what was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, you've witnessed justice." The elaborate wedding reception dissolved into chaos as family members chose sides. Some defending Leona despite the evidence, others expressing outrage at her calculated betrayal. Crystal glasses shattered on marble floors as arguments erupted between relatives who'd come to celebrate love and discovered conspiracy instead. I stood at the head table, watching the destruction of my family while feeling neither satisfaction nor regret. Justice had been served with the same precision I'd once applied to construction contracts. Arthur Welch had proved his mental competency beyond any possible doubt. The wedding was over. The reckoning had begun. The reception hall emptied with remarkable speed as family members fled the wreckage of what had been intended as a celebration. Abandoned champagne glasses and half-eaten wedding cake covered tables like debris from an emotional explosion. Crystal stemware lay shattered on marble floors, where heated arguments had erupted between relatives forced to choose sides in an impossible family civil war. "Dad, you have to listen to us," Leona sobbed, her elegant wedding gown stained with tears and spilled wine. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. We were trying to protect you." Carl paced behind her like a caged animal, alternating between rage and pathetic desperation. "You ruined everything. We could have all been wealthy. Instead, you've destroyed our future for some twisted sense of revenge." I remained seated at the head table, calmly organizing my documents while they raged. The professional audio equipment still amplified their voices across the nearly empty hall, broadcasting their desperation to the few remaining witnesses who hadn't fled in disgust. "Protect me?" I looked up from my briefcase with genuine curiosity. "By declaring me incompetent and selling my company for 60% of its value, by scheduling medical evaluations with fraudulent doctors, by planning to warehouse me in assisted living while you spent my money paying Carl's gambling debts? We love you!" Leona dropped to her knees beside my chair, mascara streaking her face like war paint. "Everything we did was because we care about your health." "Love," I repeated the word like a foreign concept. "You documented my supposed confusion episodes. You researched guardianship procedures. You contacted potential buyers for my business. That's an interesting definition of love." Aunt Margaret approached from across the hall, her face grim with determination. "Arthur, I owe you an apology. We should have seen what was happening. Leona's behavior these past months, the questions about your health, the comments about your memory. You couldn't have known," I assured her. "They were very careful, very systematic. Professional predators disguised as loving family." Uncle Robert joined her, his normally gentle demeanor hardened by disgust. "Arthur, you did the right thing. This kind of betrayal, it's unforgivable. They planned to steal your life's work and destroy your independence." Carl spun toward the remaining family members with desperate fury. "You're all fools. Arthur's lost his mind. Can't you see he's imagining conspiracies that don't exist?" "We heard the recordings," Aunt Margaret replied coldly. "We saw the legal documents, your own voices confessing to the plan." I stood slowly, gathering my briefcase and walking toward the exit with measured dignity. Behind me, Leona's sobs echoed through the sound system, while Carl continued his increasingly frantic denials. Their wedding reception had become their public trial and conviction. "Where are you going?" Leona called after me desperately. "Home. You have 48 hours to collect your belongings from my house." I paused at the hall's entrance, looking back at the daughter I'd loved more than my own life. "After that, you're on your own. Time to discover what independence really means." "Dad, please, we're family." "Family doesn't try to destroy each other for money." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but they carried the finality of a business contract. Family protects and supports each other. You chose a different path. Carl made one last desperate attempt at negotiation. "Arthur, we can work this out. The company needs young leadership. You don't understand modern business practices." I walked back to where he stood, studying his face with the cold assessment I'd once reserved for dishonest contractors. "Carl, I built a $78 million company from nothing. I understand business practices better than you'll ever comprehend. What I failed to understand was the depth of human greed." The few remaining wedding guests filed out silently, some pausing to offer me support, others too shocked by the family drama to make eye contact. The elegant reception hall that had cost $47,000 now looked like a battlefield, strewn with the casualties of betrayal. Henry Burke appeared at the exit, having watched the entire revelation from the back of the hall. "Arthur, you did what needed to be done. Sometimes love means saying no to the people who matter most." "Thank you for the warning, Henry. Without your courage, they would have succeeded." "Maybe old partners really do need to look out for each other," he replied with a sad smile. I walked through the banquet hall's entrance into the cool Minneapolis evening, leaving behind the wreckage of my daughter's wedding and the destruction of 40 years of family love. The Mississippi River flowed past the venue's windows, carrying away the remnants of trust and innocence like debris from a broken dam. My Lincoln Navigator sat alone in the parking lot, surrounded by the empty spaces where 200 guests had parked for what they had expected to be a celebration. Instead, they had witnessed the price of betrayal and the cold justice of a father who'd loved his daughter enough to destroy her when she chose greed over loyalty. The drive home would take 37 minutes through Saturday evening traffic. I had 48 hours to remove any trace of Leona and Carl from my house, 40 years to remember what my family had been before money corrupted everything, and whatever remained of my life to decide whether justice was worth the price of loneliness. Arthur Welch had won the war against his own daughter. The victory felt exactly as hollow as I'd expected. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.
My son threw me out of the house I built with my own hands and kept all my assets just to hand them over to his new wife. You have 2 hours to pack and get out. I've already changed the locks, he said coldly. I was expecting at least some compassion after 40 years of sacrifice, but found only cruelty. All I had left was a worn-out debit card my late wife Amara left me. I thought it was empty. But when I walked into that Portland bank, the teller's face went pale. "Sir, hurry up. Look at this." He called his manager. I was shocked when I discovered that my quiet, humble wife had been secretly... Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and whether you think my son deserved what's coming. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get unbelievable. The gentle scraping of sandpaper against wood filled my small workshop behind the Portland home I'd called my own for over 4 decades. At 68, my weathered hands still moved with the precision of a master craftsman, smoothing the final imperfections from what would be my last piece, a simple oak chair with hand-carved details. I paused, running my fingers along the armrest. 40 years of sawdust and sweat had built this workshop, this house, this life. Every beam bore the mark of my labor. Every corner held memories of the family I'd raised here with my beloved Amara. "Dad, we need to talk." The voice cut through the workshop's peaceful silence. I looked up to see my son Mike standing in the doorway, his expensive suit looking out of place among the wood shavings. Behind him stood Amber Holbrook, Mike's new wife of barely 6 months, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming impatiently against her designer purse. "Of course, son." I set down my sandpaper and smiled, though something in Mike's expression made my chest tighten. "What's on your mind?" Mike stepped forward, his jaw set in that stubborn way I remembered from his teenage years. But this was something harder, colder. "Dad, I need you to understand something. Amber and I are starting our own family now. We need space, privacy." "Well, the house is plenty big," I began, but Mike cut me off with a sharp gesture. "No, Dad, you don't understand." Mike's voice carried a finality that made my blood run cold. "I need you to move out. Today." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of my workbench. "Move out." "Son, this is my home. Our home. I built this place with my own hands before you were even born." Amber stepped forward, then her smile as artificial as her platinum blonde hair. "Graham, surely you can see this is for the best. Mike has worked so hard to build his company, and we really do need the space for our future children. This workshop, this house, your mother and I, we built this together. Every room holds 40 years of memories." Mike's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew harder. "Mom's been gone for 3 years, Dad. It's time to move on. I've already looked into assisted living facilities." "I don't need assistance." My voice rose. "I'm 68, not 98. I built this house. I maintain this house." The silence that followed was deafening. Mike straightened his tie, a gesture I recognized as his way of steeling himself for unpleasant business. "Dad, I've made my decision." Mike's voice was flat businesslike. "You have 2 hours to pack what you need. I'll give you a week to arrange for the rest." I stared at my son and felt something break inside my chest. 2 hours to leave the home I built. 2 hours, Mike repeated. He turned to leave, then paused without looking back. "And Dad, I've already changed the locks. Don't bother trying to come back tonight." The cruelty of those words hit harder than anything else. I sank onto my workbench stool, the same one Amara used to sit on, while watching me work her gentle voice, filling the space with stories and laughter. 2 hours later, I stood on the sidewalk outside the house I'd built with my own hands, clutching a worn duffel bag that contained 40 years of life, reduced to a few changes of clothes and photographs. The October air bit through my flannel shirt, and I felt more lost than I had since Amara's funeral. My hands shook as I opened my wallet, counting the meager bills inside, barely enough for a motel room for a few nights. But as my fingers moved through the worn leather compartments, they brushed against something I'd forgotten. Was there a faded blue debit card bearing the name Amara Whitman? I held the card up to the streetlight, studying the worn plastic that had sat untouched in my wallet for 3 years. Amara had always been secretive about her little investments, as she called them. I'd never paid much attention. She handled the household finances while I focused on my carpentry work. Maybe there's still something left, I whispered to the empty street, the card trembling in my weathered fingers, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. The next morning I walked into First National Bank with nothing but hope and desperation. I'd spent the night in a cheap motel, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of how my life had crumbled in just 2 hours. The faded blue card felt like my last lifeline. Maybe Amara had left enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. I approached the teller windows and chose the youngest one, hoping he might be patient with an old man fumbling through what was probably an outdated account. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The nameplate read Scott Anderson. I slid the worn card across the counter, feeling embarrassed by its faded condition. "I'd like to check the balance on this account, please. It belonged to my late wife." Scott picked up the card and began typing on his computer. At first, everything seemed routine, but then something changed. His typing slowed, then stopped altogether. His eyebrows drew together in confusion. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my heart sinking. Scott looked up at me, then back at his screen, his face pale. "Sir, I need to get my manager. Please just give me one moment." He walked quickly toward a glass office. Through the walls I could see him speaking urgently to a middle-aged woman in a navy suit. She looked up sharply, her gaze finding me across the banking floor. Within moments she was walking toward me. Her nameplate identified her as Linda Garrison, branch manager. "Mr. Whitman," she said, extending her hand, "would you mind if we spoke privately in my office? This account requires some special handling." My stomach dropped. Special handling. "Is there some kind of problem?" Linda's smile was careful. "Not a problem, sir. Quite the opposite. Mr. Whitman, this account is flagged as a high-priority legacy trust. I've been with this bank for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this." She led me to her office. "Before we proceed, I need to verify a few details. Your wife was Amara Whitman, correct? And she passed away approximately 3 years ago." "Yes," I said quietly. "She died of cancer. But I don't understand. She never mentioned any special accounts. We lived modestly. I'm just a carpenter." Linda exchanged a glance with Scott, then turned her computer monitor toward me. "Sir, your wife was apparently much more than that. This account is connected to a series of investment portfolios that have been growing for over 30 years. My hands gripped the arms of the chair as numbers began appearing on the screen. Investment accounts, stock portfolios, real estate holdings. The figures seemed impossible, surreal. "Mr. Whitman," Linda said gently, "are you feeling all right?" But I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the screen at numbers that seemed to dance before my eyes. Numbers with more zeros than I'd ever imagined possible. Numbers that represented a fortune I never knew existed. My modest carpenter's salary had been our only income, or so I'd thought. But here displayed in stark black and white was evidence of something else entirely. Investments in companies I'd heard of but never dreamed we could afford. Stock purchases dating back decades. Real estate holdings across multiple states. "Amara," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet office. "What did you do?" In the bank's private vault, Linda handed me a sealed envelope that had been waiting in Amara's safety deposit box for 3 years. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal, recognizing my wife's careful handwriting. "My dearest Grom," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, and you found yourself in a situation where you need this anchor. I've prepared." I had to pause, wiping my eyes. Even in death, Amara's voice came through so clearly, that gentle wisdom that had guided our family for 43 years. "You probably think I was just your simple wife who clipped coupons and tended the garden. But Graham, I was watching. Every night when you fell asleep after your long days in the workshop, I was reading about technology, about companies that were going to change the world." A memory surfaced Amara at the kitchen table with newspapers scattered around her, always asking about those computer companies. I'd smiled and told her I was better with wood than technology, never realizing she was building our future while I built furniture. Starting in 1992, her letter revealed, I began investing small amounts money I saved from our household budget, from selling my quilts. $500 here, $1,000 there. I bought shares in Apple, Microsoft, and later Google. You used to tease me about my little investments. Remember, Mum? Those little investments had grown into the fortune I'd just witnessed on Linda's screen. But the letter took a darker turn. Graham, I saw how money changes people. I watched it happen to families in our neighborhood, and I saw the early signs in our own son. The way Mike's eyes would light up when he talked about wealth. The way he began measuring success only in dollars. I remembered those conversations, now Mike's growing obsession with status, with having the biggest house, the most expensive car. Amara had tried to warn me, but I'd dismissed it as young ambition. I saw it in Mike's eyes, that hunger, the letter continued, the way he looked at our house calculating its value, the way he talked about maximizing assets. I knew that someday when I was gone he would see you as an obstacle to his inheritance. Amara had predicted yesterday's betrayal, years before it happened. So I created this anchor, my love. Not to spoil you, but to ensure you have options when you feel cornered. I designed it to activate only in desperation because I know your pride. You would never have accepted charity, even from your own wife. The final paragraph made my chest tighten. Don't let him destroy what we built together, Graham. This money isn't just numbers. It's 43 years of love, sacrifice, and dreams. Use this gift wisely, protect our legacy, and don't let greed win. The letter was signed simply, Forever yours, Amara. I folded the letter, carefully pressing it against my chest, as if I could somehow hold onto her presence. Linda sat quietly, giving me space to process this revelation. I won't let you down, Amara, I whispered to the empty vault, but as I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket, a new determination settled in my chest. Amara had given me the tools, but she'd also given me a warning about our son. If Mike had betrayed me so easily, what else was he capable of? But first I need to know what Mike is really doing. 3 days later, I sat across from Lucas Hartwell, private investigator, in his modest office overlooking downtown Portland. The man came highly recommended, a former police detective who specialized in corporate fraud. Mr. Whitman, Lucas said, we'll look into contracts, client relationships, and financial records. But I need to warn you, sometimes families don't like what we find. I thought about Amara's letter. My wife saw something in our son years ago that I was too blind to notice. I need to know the truth. Lucas opened his laptop. Digital Dynamics Corp. Tech consulting and software development. Let's see what we can find. Over the next week, Lucas worked methodically. He followed Mike to client meetings, interviewed former employees, and accessed public business records. The first red flag appeared quickly. Graham, Lucas called me Thursday morning. Digital Dynamics has lost 3 major clients in 6 months. A healthcare system, a regional bank, and a manufacturing company. All terminated contracts early and demanded refunds. Lucas dug deeper. Former employees painted a disturbing picture. Mike had been promising clients advanced software solutions his company couldn't deliver. He would collect substantial upfront payments, then delay and make excuses when delivery dates approached. The pattern is consistent, Lucas explained. Mike oversells capabilities, collects 50 to 70% payment upfront, then delivers substandard work or nothing at all. When clients complain, he blames technical difficulties. The evidence was damning. Lucas obtained internal emails where Mike instructed employees to falsify progress reports. There were invoices for software licenses never purchased and timesheets showing work never performed. Here's where it gets worse, Lucas said, pulling out a thick folder. Mike's been creating fake financial reports for potential investors. He's claiming revenue that doesn't exist and hiding client losses. My hands shook looking through the documents. Email chains showed Mike lying directly to investors. Bank statements revealed upfront client payments, diverted to personal expenses, Amber's shopping, expensive vacations, luxury cars. The healthcare system paid him $200,000 for a patient management system he never delivered, Lucas continued. The bank paid $150,000 for security software that was actually a basic program he bought for $3,000 and rebranded. I felt sick. This wasn't business failure, this was deliberate fraud. Mike's been using the company's reputation to secure personal loans, claiming the business as collateral. He owes nearly $500,000 to various creditors, and Digital Dynamics doesn't have assets to cover it. The scope of my son's deception was staggering. He was systematically stealing from clients, lying to investors, building a house of cards about to collapse. Lucas placed the thick folder between us. Graham, your son isn't just failing, he's committing fraud. Wire fraud, investor fraud, breach of contract. We're talking federal crimes. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Page after page of evidence, forged documents, falsified bank statements, email chains detailing deception. One particularly damaging email showed Mike bragging to Amber about stupid clients who pay up front for promises. Another document revealed he'd taken $250,000 from the manufacturing company for inventory management software, then subcontracted the work to overseas developers for $20,000 while pocketing the difference. How much did he steal? I whispered, staring at the mounting evidence of my son's betrayal, not just of me, but of every client who trusted him. 1 week later, I sat in attorney Jonathan Mills' office surrounded by law books and 40 years of legal experience. Jonathan had been recommended by Linda as someone who specialized in corporate acquisitions. Mr. Whitman, Jonathan said, reviewing Lucas's evidence folder, your son's company is in serious trouble. Digital Dynamics owes $2.3 million to First National Bank, and they're about to apply pressure. What does that mean? Mike's getting desperate, but there's an option that puts you in control. Jonathan pulled out a legal pad. We create a shell company, Summit Capital LLC. This company purchases Digital Dynamics debt from the bank. When you buy a company's debt, you essentially control that company. The plan was elegant. Banks often sold problematic loans rather than deal with foreclosure. If Summit Capital purchased Mike's debt, I'd become his primary creditor with controlling leverage. Mike won't know who's behind Summit Capital until we choose to reveal it, Jonathan explained. Over 3 days, Jonathan worked precisely. He established Summit Capital with me as sole owner, created banking relationships, and contacted First National's commercial lending department. The bank was receptive. Mike had been late on payments for 4 months, and his declining revenue made them nervous. They'll sell the debt for 70 cents on the dollar, Jonathan reported. $1.6 million, and you'll own Mike's company. I signed the papers with steady hands, thinking of Amara's letter about protecting our legacy. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Mike had stolen from clients, lied to investors, betrayed everything we'd taught him. The wire transfer completed Friday afternoon. Jonathan's phone rang within an hour. It's done, he said. First National transferred all Digital Dynamics debt to Summit Capital. This gives you the right to call in the debt immediately or restructure ownership. He handed me more documents. I prepared paperwork to convert debt to equity. As of today, you own 78% of Digital Dynamics Corp. I held the ownership certificates, feeling their weight. My son had no idea his fate rested in my hands. Mike still thinks he's seeking investors, I said. Exactly. He's been making calls all week, arranging meetings with potential backers. He has no idea his primary creditor changed or that his new creditor knows him very well. Jonathan leaned back. What's your next move? I looked toward the downtown skyline where Mike's company occupied 2 floors of a glass tower. He was probably up there making promises to investors, spinning the same lies he'd been telling for months. The irony struck me. A week ago, Mike threw me out of the house I'd built with my hands. Today, I owned the company he'd built with lies and theft. Now comes the hard part, I said, folding the ownership documents carefully. Mike had betrayed not just me, but every client who'd trusted him. He'd used their money to fund his luxury lifestyle while delivering nothing but broken promises. The healthcare system still waited for their patient management software. The bank never received their security system. The manufacturing company's inventory problems remained unsolved. But now I had the power to make it right. Time to face my son. The next morning, Mike received a call about a potential major investor, wanting to meet immediately. According to Jonathan, who'd arranged the meeting through intermediaries, this investor represented significant capital. I arrived at Mike's office building early, taking the elevator to the 20th floor where Digital Dynamics occupied a corner suite. The receptionist directed me to conference room B, where I positioned myself facing the windows back to the door. Mike entered carrying his leather portfolio, wearing his most expensive suit. I could hear the confidence in his footsteps, a desperate man who thought salvation had arrived. Good morning, Mike said to my back. I'm Mike Whitman, CEO of Digital Dynamics. Thank you for considering our company. I turned slowly, watching his face transform from professional enthusiasm to complete shock. Hello, son. Mike's portfolio slipped from his hands, papers scattering across the table. His mouth opened without sound, face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing panic. Dad, what are you doing here? This is my business meeting. I'm expecting an investor. Actually, us, I said, settling into the head chair. This is our business meeting. I am the investor, Mike. Or more accurately, I'm the new majority owner of Digital Dynamics Corp. I slid the ownership documents across the table. Mike's hands trembled as he read the legal language spelling out his downfall. This is impossible, he whispered. You're a carpenter. You don't have this kind of money. Your mother was a remarkable son. She saw things I was too blind to notice. I opened Lucas's investigation folder. She also taught me about protecting what we built together. Mike's face went pale as I revealed the evidence. Email printouts, financial records, client complaints, forged invoices, everything laid out chronologically. The healthcare system, I said. $200,000 for software you never delivered. The regional bank, $150,000 for security software that was actually a $3,000 program. You rebranded. Dad, I can explain. The manufacturing company, $250,000 for inventory management. You subcontracted it overseas for $20,000 and kept the rest. My voice remained steady. How many clients trusted you while you bought Amber luxury vacations? Mike's composure cracked. It's not what it looks like. Business is complicated. Sometimes you make promises to secure funding. You stole from people, Mike. That healthcare system still waits for software to help patients. The bank's security remains unfixed because of your lies. I pulled out the most damaging evidence, Mike's emails to Amber bragging about stupid clients who pay up front for promises. Mike read his own words, shoulders sagging as reality settled in. The confident CEO facade collapsed, leaving only a frightened man who'd built success on stolen trust. What do you want? He asked quietly. I closed the folders and looked at my son. Really looked at him. Somewhere along the way, the boy I'd taught to use his first saw had become someone I didn't recognize. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, Mike. You threw me out because you thought I was powerless. You stole from clients for the same reason. But power isn't about expensive cars or big houses. I walked to the door, then turned back. You have 24 hours to decide, face the consequences like a man, or I'll let the authorities decide for you. Either way, the clients you stole from will get their money back. Mike sat alone as I left hands shaking as he reached for his phone. Finally understanding his father was no longer the powerless old man he'd discarded. 24 hours passed. Mike never called. I sat in the FBI field office across from Agent Lisa Crawford, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in white-collar crime. Lucas's evidence folder lay open between us. Agent Crawford, I said steadily, my son has defrauded multiple clients out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. She'd been reviewing the documents for an hour, making notes. Mr. Whitman, this is substantial evidence of wire fraud and embezzlement. These email chains show clear intent to deceive. The falsified invoices, fake progress reports were looking at federal charges. I nodded, thinking of healthcare workers still waiting for software, the bank's unresolved security issues, the manufacturing company's ongoing problems. Those clients deserve their money back, and other potential victims need protection. 2 days later, I watched from across the street as 3 black SUVs pulled up to Mike's building. Federal agents moved efficiently into the lobby. Jonathan called 20 minutes later. It's happening, Graham. They're executing the warrant. The arrest made local news. Local tech CEO arrested on federal fraud charges. Footage showed Mike being led out in handcuffs, face hidden, as reporters shouted questions. Amber appeared in the background, clutching her designer purse, panic-stricken. By the next day, she'd hired her own lawyer, publicly distancing herself from Mike. The trial took 3 months. I attended every day, sitting in the back as prosecutors laid out the case. Client after client testified about broken promises, stolen money, damaged businesses. Mike's attorney tried painting him as an overwhelmed entrepreneur, making mistakes under pressure. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails bragging to Amber about easy money, falsified documents, the pattern of taking payment without delivering. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, I felt no satisfaction, only deep sadness. The judge was stern during sentencing. Mr. Whitman, you systematically defrauded trusting clients, stealing money intended to improve healthcare security and operations. Your actions damaged not only finances, but faith in honest business. Mike received 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $1.8 million in restitution. I sat watching my son's shoulders shake as reality settled in. This was the boy I'd taught to measure twice and cut once to take pride in honest work, to build things that lasted. After the gavel fell, I walked outside. The prison transport van waited at the courthouse steps. Through reinforced windows, I could see Mike's silhouette, no longer the confident CEO, but a convicted felon, beginning a journey he'd chosen with every lie. The van pulled away, carrying my son toward consequences I'd hoped he'd never face. As I stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching the vehicle disappear into Portland traffic, I thought about Amara's letter. She'd seen this coming years ago, had tried to prepare me for the moment when love and justice would collide in the most painful way possible. The clients would get their money back. The healthcare system could finally purchase the software they needed. The bank could address their security vulnerabilities. Justice had been served. But I was still a father who'd just watched his son go to prison. Maybe this is what he needs to learn, I whispered to the empty courthouse steps. 6 months later, I received the first letter from Mike. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it, recognizing his handwriting on prison stationery. His words hit me harder than expected. Dad, I finally understand what I lost. Not just money, but your trust. I've had 6 months to think about everything and I'm ashamed. Not because I got caught, but because I became someone you and Mom never raised me to be. The letter described his daily routine at the federal facility. He'd enrolled in vocational carpentry, the same trade I'd tried teaching him as a boy when he was too impatient to listen. The instructor, Mr. Rodriguez, reminds me of you. He says measure twice, cut once. I remember you telling me that, but I never listened. I was always hurrying to the next thing, the bigger thing. 3 weeks later, I drove to the prison for our first meeting. Mike looked different walking into the visiting room, thinner, wearing standard khakis instead of expensive suits. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by humility. Dad, he said quietly, sitting across from me, thank you for coming. Mike leaned forward, hands clasped. I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. Those clients trusted me and I stole from them. I stole from you, too. I stole the son you thought you'd raised. Justice had to be served, son, I replied. But you're still my boy. Mike's eyes filled with tears. I've been writing letters, Dad, to every client I defrauded. Not asking forgiveness, I don't deserve that. Just acknowledging what I did. Taking responsibility. He told me about the woodworking shop, how sawdust and tools reminded him of our old workshop. How he was learning patience, precision, honest work's value. Mr. Rodriguez says I have natural ability. Guess it runs in the family. He's teaching me furniture, making proper joinery. Things you tried teaching me when I was too stubborn. What are your plans when you get out? Mike straightened. I want to work, Dad. Real work. Pay back every penny I stole, even if it takes my whole life. Maybe construction carpentry is something honest. Build things instead of tearing them down. I studied his face for signs of old manipulation. But I saw genuine remorse, a man finally understanding his actions' weight. The healthcare system got their software, I told him. I made sure of it. The bank, too. All your clients got their money back. Mike nodded, tears streaming. Thank you. I know that was you, not the restitution order. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. It was the right thing to do. As visiting hours ended, Mike stood. Dad, I know I have no right to ask, but when I get out, could I maybe work with you? Learn the trade properly this time. I looked at my son and saw glimpses of the boy I'd once known, the one who'd gotten lost somewhere along the way. We'll see, Mike. Focus on becoming the man your mother would be proud of. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Mike was learning, growing, becoming someone different behind those walls. Amara, I said to the empty car, he's learning. But pulling into my driveway, I realized something else. Mike's redemption was only part of the story. Amara had given me more than just the means for justice. She'd given me the opportunity to create something lasting. Now I need to build something worthy of your legacy. 2 years later, the Whitman Learning Center opened its doors on a crisp October morning in Portland. I stood before the modest brick building holding the ceremonial scissors as local news cameras captured the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The center had been built with Amara's investment fortune transformed from numbers on a screen into something real, something that would help people rebuild their lives. This center represents second chances, I told the small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. It's for anyone who wants to learn a new skill, find honest work, or simply discover that it's never too late to start over. Inside, the classrooms were equipped with woodworking stations, computer labs, and spaces for teaching practical skills like home repair and small engine maintenance. The smell of fresh sawdust reminded me of my old workshop, but this time it represented hope rather than solitude. Mike had been released from prison 3 months earlier. True to his word, he'd spent his time learning carpentry and had written letters to every client he'd defrauded. More importantly, he'd learned something that couldn't be taught in any classroom: humility. "Mr. Patterson," Mike said patiently to a 70-year-old former factory worker, "let's try that email attachment one more time. There's no rush, we have all day." I watched from the doorway as Mike guided the older man through the computer basics class. The arrogant CEO who'd once bragged about stupid clients was gone, replaced by someone who understood that teaching required patience and genuine care. Our first graduating class had been small, 12 students ranging from 55 to 78 years old, but every one of them had found employment or started their own small business. Mrs. Pierce now ran a successful furniture repair service. Robert Martinez had launched a handyman business that stayed booked solid. Dad Mike said during our lunch break, "Mrs. Williams wants to know if we can add a sewing class next semester. She thinks there's demand for alterations and mending services." I nodded, making a note. Mike had become my unofficial program coordinator, and his ideas were always practical and thoughtful. Working together had slowly rebuilt the trust between us, not through grand gestures, but through shared purpose and daily proof of his changed character. "That's a good idea," I said. "Your mother always said the community needed more places where people could learn practical skills." At the end of the day, after the last student had left and Mike had gone home to his small apartment, I sat in my office looking at the framed photograph on my desk. Amara smiled back at me from our wedding day, her eyes bright with the same wisdom that had guided her secret investments decades ago. The center was more than just a training facility. It was proof that money could be transformed into something meaningful. Every student who learned a new skill, every person who found work, every small business that started here was part of Amara's true legacy. "Thank you, Amara," I whispered to the photograph. "Your legacy lives on, not in money, but in second chances." Outside, Portland's evening lights were beginning to twinkle. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities for people to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. The Whitman Learning Center had become exactly what Amara had envisioned: an anchor for people who needed stability, a place where honest work was valued, and where second chances weren't just possible, they were guaranteed. Looking back at my journey, I realized that sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people we love most. My story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about understanding that true stories like mine happen every day when families are torn apart by greed and misplaced priorities. Don't be like Mike was don't let success blind you to what really matters. I've heard countless grandpa stories from other men my age, and they all echo the same truth. Money changes people, but character defines them. When Mike threw me out of my home, he thought he was eliminating an obstacle. What he didn't realize was that he was destroying the foundation of everything we'd built together. But here's what I learned, and what I want every father and son to understand. God has a way of turning our darkest moments into opportunities for redemption. When I found Amara's letter and discovered her investments, I knew God was giving me the tools, not just for justice, but for healing. And when Mike finally learned humility behind prison walls, I saw God's hand working in ways I never expected. The grandpa stories that matter most aren't about wealth or success. They're about second chances and the courage to rebuild what's been broken. These true stories remind us that it's never too late to choose love over pride, forgiveness over bitterness. That's why I share these grandpa stories, because real wisdom comes from lived experience. My advice: don't wait for a crisis to show your family what they mean to you. Don't let greed poison the relationships that should matter most. And remember that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to make things right. These true stories teach us that redemption is always possible. What's your second chance story? Share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of family forgiveness and finding hope in the darkest moments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Every night, my son said he was working on his car in the garage. At 3 a.m., I heard a loud crash, and his voice whispering, "Don't let the old man find out." I hid and watched him load a heavy bag into his truck. When the bag opened, I froze when I saw what he had been hiding from me. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching this story from. What would you do if you discovered your own family was hiding something this big? I've always been a light sleeper. At 65, running Brennan Antiques in Charleston's historic district for 40 years teaches you to listen for trouble. But that November night, something woke me that had nothing to do with my usual concerns. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Our old Charleston single house was quiet except for familiar settling sounds. My wife, Margaret, had passed 3 years ago, leaving just Derek and me in this big place on King Street. Then I heard it. A muffled thud from the garage, followed by Derek's pickup starting up. My heart quickened. Derek, 35, and working at the Charleston Heritage Museum, had always been responsible. 3 a.m. truck runs weren't his style. I slipped to the bedroom window facing the side yard. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. Derek was moving between the garage and his Ford F-150, carrying a heavy canvas bag, the kind we used at my shop for transporting delicate pieces. He moved carefully, like someone avoiding detection. The garage light cast shadows across the driveway. Derek's face looked strained as he hefted the bag into the truck bed. For a moment, the canvas gaped open. Even from my second-floor window, I could see the unmistakable gleam of silver, genuine antique pieces. There was an ornate picture frame, definitely 18th century from the gilding. My trained eye caught colonial-era silver that made collectors' hearts race. But here's what made my stomach drop. Some pieces looked familiar. That silver tea service, wasn't that the Revere reproduction from my shop's display case? And that frame looked exactly like one from my back room. Derek made 2 more trips carrying bags and wrapped bundles. With each load, my confusion deepened. If these were from my shop, why sneak them out at 3 a.m.? More troubling, there were items I didn't recognize. Valuable pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum. A museum like the Charleston Heritage Museum where my son worked? Derek closed the tailgate and stood looking back at the house. I stepped away from the window instinctively. When I looked again, he was driving away. The headlights disappeared down King Street. I stood there 10 more minutes, mind racing through disturbing possibilities. Derek had keys to my shop, knew the security codes, had my complete trust. But he also had access to the museum's collection, pieces worth hundreds of thousands. I returned to bed but couldn't sleep. When his truck returned an hour later, I listened to careful footsteps on the stairs, his bedroom door closing softly. My son, who'd never taken a candy bar without permission, had just loaded what looked like stolen antiques into his truck. Derek had always been my pride and joy. Now I was watching him do something that could destroy everything we'd built. The morning couldn't come fast enough. I had to find out what was happening. The morning couldn't come fast enough, and by 8 a.m., I was already downstairs unlocking Brennan Antiques. The familiar smell of old wood polish and aged leather usually brought me comfort, but today everything felt different. I walked straight to the back room where I kept my most valuable pieces. My hands shook as I pulled out my inventory ledger, the same leather-bound book I'd used for 20 years. 4 pieces were missing. The Revere reproduction tea service, gone. An 18th century mahogany picture frame I'd been saving for the right buyer, gone. A set of colonial silver candlesticks that had been in my family for generations, gone. And most troubling, a pewter bowl that belonged to Margaret's grandmother, irreplaceable and definitely not for sale. I stared at the empty spaces, trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed in the darkness. Derek had access to everything new where I kept keys, understood every piece's value. But why would he take them? The front door chimed at exactly 9 a.m. Derek's punctuality had always been admirable, until today when it felt almost mocking. "Morning, Dad." His voice sounded strained. "You're here early." I turned slowly, studying my son's face. Dark circles, fidgeting hands, avoiding eye contact. This wasn't the Derek I'd raised. "We need to talk about last night." Derek's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Last night, 3:17 a.m., I saw you loading bags from our garage." I stepped closer. "Derek, where are my antiques?" His face went pale, then flushed. "Dad, I can explain." "Then explain. I'm missing 4 valuable pieces, and you're the only other person with access." Derek set down his coffee and ran both hands through his hair, a nervous habit since childhood. "It's not what you think. I wasn't stealing." "Then what?" "I was moving them somewhere safe, for a museum project." The words rushed out rehearsed. Charleston Heritage Museum is working on a security initiative. We're temporarily relocating high-value pieces from private collections to protect them from a suspected theft ring. I stared at him. "A theft ring? 3 antique shops have been hit this month. Professional jobs. The museum offered secure storage until police catch whoever's doing it." It sounded plausible, almost. but something in Derek's voice made my stomach churn. Why didn't you tell me? Why sneak around at 3 a.m.? I didn't want to worry you. The museum said discretion was crucial. Fewer people knowing about relocations, the better. The front door chimed again. Derek, are you here? Kira Blake stepped inside, and even after 2 years of marriage to my son, she still commanded attention. Tall, elegant auburn hair catching morning light through the windows. Oh, Gordon. She smiled warmly, kissing my cheek. I didn't expect you here so early. Inventory check, I said carefully. Kira glanced between us, smile faltering. Is everything all right? Dad saw me loading the antiques last night, Derek said quietly. Kira's expression shifted to understanding, then relief. Thank goodness Derek's been worried about keeping the museum project secret. I told him he should have explained everything from the beginning. She turned to me, green eyes earnest. Gordon Derek is doing something wonderful. Charleston Heritage Museum identified a sophisticated theft ring, targeting collectors and dealers. They're offering secure storage until criminals are caught. The museum insisted on discretion. She continued, squeezing my arm gently. Police think the thieves have inside information, someone who knows which shops have valuable inventory. I looked between them. Derek nodded earnestly. Your pieces are safer there, Dad. State-of-the-art security, climate control, everything. Kira smiled again. Derek was planning to tell you today anyway. The storage period is almost over. I wanted to believe them. Paternal instinct said trust my son. But something nagged at me, some detail that didn't fit. When do I get them back? Soon, Derek said. Very soon? I nodded slowly, letting their explanations settle over my doubts. Maybe 40 years in antiques had made me too suspicious. Maybe I was being paranoid. But 2 hours later, my world would collapse completely. 2 hours later, my world collapsed completely. 3 sharp knocks echoed through Brennan Antiques. Through the window, I saw a Charleston police cruiser already drawing stares from King Street tourists. Charleston Police, we need Derek Brennan. The lead officer, stern-faced and 40-ish, held up an official document. We have a warrant to search these premises and vehicles registered to Derek Brennan. We're investigating theft from Charleston Heritage Museum. The words hit like a physical blow. There must be some mistake. Is that Derek Brennan's Ford F-150 Outback? I nodded numbly, thinking of those bags I'd watched him load 8 hours earlier. Officers moved through my shop with practiced efficiency, photographing everything, checking serial numbers. Customers slipped out quietly. My life's work had become a crime scene. Derek arrived as they finished searching his truck. Dad, what's... He stopped, seeing the police cars, the gathering crowd. Derek Brennan, you're under arrest for theft of cultural property. What? No, there's been a mistake. But there hadn't been. In Derek's truck, wrapped in museum cloth, they found 6 Charleston Heritage Museum pieces. 18th century silver colonial paintings, artifacts worth hundreds of thousands. Mixed with them were my 4 missing antiques. Derek, how is this possible? I watched them read his rights. Dad, I can explain. His voice cracked. This isn't what it looks like. Kira arrived as they handcuffed Derek, running frantically in heels, pushing through gawkers. Derek, oh my God, what's happening? When she saw the handcuffs, she sobbed. Completely genuine sounding. Officers, please, there's been a terrible mistake. Ma'am, step back. Derek talked to me. Derek looked at his wife with pure anguish. Kira, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry for what you're scaring me. The performance was flawless. Kira clutched Derek's arm as they led him away, tears streaming, voice breaking with apparent confusion and terror. Gordon, do something, call a lawyer. I stood frozen, watching my son loaded into a police car like a common criminal. Phones came out recording the spectacle. 40 years building my reputation, and now this. We'll need you at the station for questioning Mr. Brennan, the officer told me. The police cars pulled away with Derek. The crowd dispersed, already spreading news through Charleston's tight-knit district. By evening, everyone would know Derek Brennan had been arrested for theft. Kira stood on the sidewalk watching the cars disappear, shoulders shaking with sobs. I was about to comfort her when she turned around. For just 2 seconds, when she thought no one was looking, I saw her face. The tears remained, but her eyes were completely cold, calculating. No grief, no shock, no confusion, only satisfaction. She caught me staring and immediately shifted back to devastated wife, but I'd seen enough. That night I couldn't sleep. Something was very wrong about Kira. The next morning I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of wallowing in shock, I was going to find out the truth about my daughter-in-law. I'd spent 40 years building relationships in Charleston's antique community. Time to use them. My first call was to Margaret Wells at Palmetto Antiques. We'd traded pieces and information since the 70s. Margaret, it's Gordon. Have you ever heard anything about Kira, my daughter-in-law? A pause. Kira Blake. The redhead can't say I have. Why, just curious about her background. She's been family for 2 years, but I don't know much about her past. 3 more calls to dealers yielded nothing. Kira had never been involved in Charleston's antique scene before marrying Derek. For someone married to a museum curator and living with an antique dealer, that seemed odd. Next, I turned to social media. Kira's profiles were perfectly curated. Beautiful photos of her and Derek at restaurants, galleries, museum events. But scrolling back through 2.5 years of posts, something struck me. There was nothing before Derek. No college friends, no family photos, no history. Her social media began exactly when she started dating my son. I pulled out Derek's photo albums. There. Their first date inscription, Kira and me at Magnolia Plantation, September 15th, 2.5 years ago. I checked Derek's employment records. He'd started at Charleston Heritage Museum September 1st, 2.5 years ago. 2 weeks. Kira met Derek just 2 weeks after he started his museum job. Coincidence. My 40 years in business had taught me to be suspicious of coincidences involving valuable objects and attractive women. I needed more information, and I knew who to ask. Mrs. Dorothy Ashford lived next door, a sprightly 80-year-old who'd been watching the neighborhood since the Eisenhower administration. I found her deadheading roses with surgical precision. Dorothy, have you noticed anything unusual about Kira lately? Her eyes sharpened. Funny you should ask. I've been wondering about that girl for months. What do you mean? She's been having meetings at that cafe on Meeting Street with outdoor tables. I walk past there for my library book club. Meetings with whom? Men. Always different but similar. Expensive suits, fancy watches, polished appearance. Not tourists, though. My pulse quickened. How do you know? Tourists don't have serious business conversations. These were intense. Leaning in close, taking notes, exchanging envelopes. Envelopes. Small ones. Cash or documents, maybe. Dorothy snipped another rose. She always looked around nervously, checking if anyone was watching. How long? At least 6 months, I noticed, because she dressed up for coffee dates, but told Derek she was running errands or meeting girlfriends. My mouth went dry. She lied. Constantly. Once I heard her tell Derek she was grocery shopping, but I'd just seen her walking back from Meeting Street without bags. Dorothy fixed me with a steady gaze. Gordon, something about that girl never sat right. She's too perfect, too charming. People who work that hard to be likable are usually hiding something. I thanked Dorothy and walked home mind racing. Secret meetings with strangers. Lies about whereabouts. Social media history beginning exactly when she met Derek. I needed to know who Kira Blake really was. I needed professional help, and I knew exactly who to call. Kenneth Walsh had been a Charleston police detective for 25 years before starting his private investigation firm. We'd met when he'd helped me track stolen Civil War memorabilia. If anyone could uncover the truth about Kira Blake, it was Kenneth. His office was in a converted Calhoun Street house, all hardwood floors and lazy ceiling fans. Gordon, good to see you, though. I'm sorry about the circumstances. Kenneth was lean 50-ish with the steady gaze of someone who'd spent years reading lies. Tell me what you need. I explained everything. Derek's arrest, the mysterious antiques, Kira's explanations, Mrs. Dorothy's observations about secret meetings. Kenneth took notes, asking occasional questions. When I finished, he leaned back. You think the wife's involved? I think she's not who she claims to be. Give me 48 hours. Kenneth called, the next afternoon voice grim. Gordon, you need to come in. What I found is bigger than expected. An hour later, I sat across from Kenneth as he spread photographs and documents across his desk like murder trial evidence. Kira Blake doesn't exist, he said without preamble. At least not the version your son married. My heart sank. What do you mean? The woman in your house is Kira Summers. Criminal record in Florida. Fraud identity theft conspiracy. Served 18 months federal prison 3 years ago. Kenneth slid a mugshot across the desk. Definitely Kira, but harder with shorter hair and those cold eyes I'd glimpsed after Derek's arrest. Federal prison. Art theft ring. High-end stuff, paintings, sculptures, antiques. They'd target wealthy collectors. Auction houses working months to set up single jobs. The room spun. And she married my son? Gets worse. Kenneth pulled out another file. Her ring's still active. International operation moving stolen art through dealer networks. FBI's been tracking them for years. She's still involved? She married Derek specifically for access to Charleston's art scene. Your shop, his museum. Perfect cover. Legitimate access to valuables, insider security knowledge, respectable husband above suspicion. I stared at the mugshot, remembering how she'd charmed me from day one. Always interested in my inventory, asking about provenance and values. Encouraging Derek's museum career, praising his expertise. 2.5 years of setup, I said quietly. Serious commitment to a con. Kenneth leaned forward. Those men Mrs. Ashford saw Kira meeting, I showed her photos of known associates. She identified too. My blood chilled. They're here. Months now. Setting up operations, identifying targets. Kenneth's expression darkened. Your son isn't criminal, Gordon. He's a patsy. Kira manipulated him from day one, moving pieces, accessing restricted areas, providing information. When arrest came, guess who'd be holding evidence? The betrayal's scope hit like a physical blow. Derek's confusion during arrest, desperate apologies, genuine shock at finding stolen goods. All real. She framed him. Classic misdirection. While everyone focuses on the corrupt museum, curator real criminals disappear with millions in stolen art. Derek was sitting in jail, probably still trying to understand how his life collapsed. My son, who'd never cheated on a test, facing federal charges because he'd loved the wrong woman. What do we do? Kenneth gathered files. Normally I'd say local police, but Kira's people are sophisticated. They've covered tracks well. Local cops might lack resources for international art theft operations. Then what? Federal help, FBI art crime team specifically. They've hunted this network for years. Kenneth met my eyes. But once you make that call, there's no going back. This becomes federal investigation, and everyone, including Derek, becomes part of it. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 65 years. Derek needed help, but I needed power greater than anything I could provide. My son needed saving, and I was going to save him. The FBI field office in Charleston was all concrete and bulletproof glass designed to intimidate. I'd never imagined walking through those doors voluntarily carrying evidence about my own daughter-in-law. Security was thorough. Metal detectors guards who looked like they could bench press trucks. After explaining my purpose, I waited 40 minutes before Agent Elowen Porter appeared. Early 40s, sharp blue eyes, prematurely gray hair in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her handshake was firm manner, all business. Mr. Brennan, you have information about art theft operations. My daughter-in-law is part of an international smuggling ring, and my son's in jail for her crimes. Agent Porter's expression didn't change, but I caught interest flickering. Let's talk privately. Her office was spartanly furnished. Government desk computer walls covered with photographs of stolen artwork. Paintings, sculptures, antiques, all stamped, recovered, or missing in red. I spread Kenneth Walsh's files across her desk, explaining everything from Derek's midnight runs, to Kira's secret meetings, to her suspicious timing in our lives. Agent Porter studied each document, making occasional notes. When I finished, she leaned back. Mr. Brennan, you've just handed me our biggest break in 3 years. You know Kira. Kira Summers has been on our watch list since prison release. What we didn't know was her location or operational status. She pulled out a thick file. She's key player in the Collector Network. International art theft and smuggling operation. My stomach dropped. International, over 50 million stolen across 6 countries. Museum heists, private collections, auction cons. Sophisticated patient, extremely dangerous. Dangerous how Agent Porter's expression darkened. 2 potential witnesses died in apparent accidents. Miami Gallery owner, Atlanta collector. We suspect murder. The room felt cold. This woman's been living in my house 2 years, using your son as unwitting accomplice while planning their next operation. Charleston's art scene is worth millions. Perfect target. Can you help Derek? If you help us. We need evidence of active conspiracy. Recorded confessions, operational documentation, network proof. Help. You become our inside man. Kira doesn't know we've identified her. You're just Derek's confused father, probably desperate for answers. My mouth went dry. You want me to approach her? Offer to help her. Say you've figured out Derek's activities, understand the antique business could be valuable to her operation. She'll never believe that. You're 65 widowed watching your son face federal charges. Could be a man who's lost everything willing to do anything for his boy, or realize there's money in gray markets. Agent Porter produced a recording device button-sized. We'll wire you position backup teams. Get her talking about plans, associates, operations. If she suspects so, that's why we'll have backup close. Matter-of-fact tone carried underlying warning. Mr. Brennan, I won't lie. This is dangerous. These people kill to protect operations. I thought about Derek in jail, wondering how his father could believe him criminal. About Kira's cold eyes when unguarded. About 40 years building honest business destroyed by lies. What do I do? Agent Porter smiled for the first time. Convince Kira Blake you want to join her team. Make her believe you'll betray everything you've stood for to save your son. She handed me her direct number. Can you do that? I pocketed the card and stood. Agent Porter, I've spent 40 years reading people in antiques. I know when someone's selling me fakes. And now it's my turn to be the seller. That evening I prepared for the most dangerous meeting of my life. At 9 p.m. I made the call that would either save my son or get me killed. Kira, it's Gordon. I need to see you tonight, at the shop. A pause. Gordon, it's late. Can't this wait? It's about Derek, about what he was really doing. I let desperation creep into my voice. I know Kira. I know everything. Longer pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I checked Agent Porter's recording device. Button-sized, invisible ones attached. FBI teams were positioned around King Street, but felt miles away as I waited in my darkened shop. Kira arrived exactly on time, heels clicking before she knocked. Perfect as always. Elegant coat-styled hair, concerned expression. Gordon, you sounded upset. What's this about? I locked the door and gestured toward the back office. We need privacy. She followed, but I noticed her eyes scanning Sightline's exit routes, professional habits. Oh, sit down. I settled behind my desk, projecting broken old man. I've been thinking since Derek's arrest. We all have. It's been horrible. Has it or exactly what you planned? Something shifted in her posture. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. 2.5 years of planning. Meeting Derek 2 weeks after he started the museum job. Her mask slipped slightly. Gordon, you're not thinking clearly. More clearly than in months. I pulled out Kenneth Walsh's file. Kira Summers, federal prison, art theft conspiracy. She went still. Only the old building's settling sounds remained. How did you... Does it matter? Question is what now? Kira calculated weighing options. What do you want? My son out of jail, and compensation for being played. Compensation. You used my shop connections reputation. Derek's going to prison for your crimes. Cut me in on profits. She laughed like breaking glass. You think you can blackmail me? I think we can help each other. You need legitimate access to Charleston's market. Someone who knows collectors' weak auction house security. I leaned back. I need money for Derek's defense. Kira studied me, then slowly smiled. I always suspected you were smarter than you seemed. Smart enough to know when I'm beat. Derek's finished. I don't have to be. What exactly are you proposing? Partnership. Tell me what you're really after, I help you get it. You make Derek's charges disappear, give me percentage. Kira pulled out her phone, sent a quick text. Derek's charges can't disappear, but they can be redirected. Redirected how? Made to look like he was coerced by someone else. Her smile turned predatory. Someone like you. Desperate father who forced his son to steal from his employer. My blood chilled. That wasn't the plan, but it's what's happening. Unless you'd prefer Derek's federal prison cell. She leaned forward, voice dropping to intimate whisper. You want to know the beautiful part? Gordon Derek never suspected a thing. I spent 2 years making him fall so deeply in love, he'd do anything I asked. Move inventory after hours for security reasons. Access restricted museum areas for special projects. He was so eager to impress me. You manipulated him. I destroyed him. Pure satisfaction in her voice. And when the time came, I made one anonymous call to police about suspicious activity at Brennan Antiques. Derek was so confused when they found stolen goods in his truck. Kept saying he was just helping his wife with museum business. Outside car doors slammed, multiple vehicles. Kira's smile widened. Did you really think I didn't know you'd try something? 3 large men in expensive suits walked through my door without knocking. Gentlemen, Kira said pleasantly, meet Derek's father. He's been asking too many questions. The largest cracked his knuckles. Should we take him somewhere private? Kira looked at me with those cold eyes. No need. Your son is in jail, Gordon. No one left to protect you. She stood slowly savoring the moment. Time to send you on your way. I'd heard everything needed to save Derek, but might not live to use it. Kira nodded to the largest man. Make it quick and clean. He reached inside his jacket, and I saw the metallic glint of a gun barrel. This was it. I was about to die in my own shop, surrounded by 40 years of carefully collected antiques. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. Overturning my desk chair, I bolted toward the front of the shop, weaving between display cases and furniture. Behind me, I heard Kira curse, and the heavy footsteps of her enforcers giving chase. "Don't let him reach the street," she shouted. The second gunman appeared at the front door, blocking my escape route. His weapon was already drawn, pointed directly at my chest. "End of the line, old man." I was trapped between armed killers in my own store, with nowhere left to run. The recording device felt like a lead weight against my chest. All that evidence, all that proof of Derek's innocence about to die with me. Then the front windows exploded inward. "FBI, drop your weapons." Agent Elowen Porter came through the shattered glass like an avenging Angel Service weapon, drawn backup agents flooding in behind her. Simultaneously, the back door burst open as more federal agents swarmed the shop. Federal agents get on the ground now. The gunman at the front door spun toward the new threat, and I dove behind a Civil War-era armoire as the shooting started. It was over in seconds. Professional law enforcement against street criminals. There was no contest. The sharp crack of gunfire, shouted commands, the crash of overturning furniture, then sudden ringing silence. Clear front, clear back. Suspects down. I peered around the armoire to see two of Kira's men on the ground hands, zip-tied behind their backs. The third was being treated by a paramedic for what looked like a shoulder wound. Kira herself was pressed against the back wall, Agent Porter's gun trained on her center mass. "Kira Summers, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, art theft, racketeering, and about 15 other federal charges. I'm going to enjoy reading to you." "You can't prove anything," Kira snarled, but her composure had finally cracked completely. Gone was the elegant Charleston socialite. This was the federal prisoner, the career criminal, the predator who destroyed my son's life for profit. "Actually, we can," Agent Porter smiled grimly. "Mr. Brennan's recording device picked up your entire confession, including the part where you admitted to framing Derek and ordering his father's murder." Kira's face went white as the handcuffs clicked shut. "Kira Summers," Agent Porter continued, "you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law." As they led her away, Kira caught my eye one last time. The mask was completely gone now, just cold hatred and the fury of a predator whose long game had finally been exposed. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes, it is," I replied quietly. Agent Porter approached me as the crime scene team began processing my destroyed shop. "Mr. Brennan, are you injured?" I shook my head, still trying to process what had just happened. "The recording. Did you get everything? Every word? Confession to art theft, conspiracy, manipulation of Derek ordering your murder? It's all there." She holstered her weapon. "We've been trying to get evidence like this on the Collector Network for 3 years. What you did tonight will put them away for decades." "And Derek?" Agent Porter's expression softened. "Derek will be released tomorrow morning. All charges dropped. The recording makes it clear he was an unwitting victim of an elaborate con game." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to sit down on a nearby chair. "He's really free. He's really free. Mr. Brennan, your son, is going to need time to process what happened to him. 2.5 years of psychological manipulation doesn't heal overnight. But he's alive, he's innocent, and he's going home." I looked around my shop. Windows, shattered furniture, overturned police tape everywhere. It would take months to repair the damage. But Derek was coming home. "Agent Porter, thank you for everything." "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. What you did tonight took real courage." 3 days later, I stood waiting at the gates of Charleston County Jail, watching for my son to walk free. 3 days later, I stood at Charleston County Jail gates, watching the most important door in my world swing open. Derek emerged blinking in November sunlight, wearing clothes from his arrest 4 days earlier. 4 days that felt like years. He looked older, worn by an experience no innocent man should endure. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I pulled my son into a hug 40 years of fatherhood had built toward. "You have nothing to apologize for. I believed her, trusted her, let her use me to hurt you, the shop, everything we built. Derek, you fell in love. That's not a crime." We drove home in comfortable silence. Derek stared at Charleston streets like seeing them for the first time. "Tell me how she did it," I said finally. Derek was quiet then, started small. She'd ask about museum work, seem interested in collection security, said she wanted to understand my passion. "You wanted to impress her?" This beautiful woman was interested in me, my work. She'd suggest I photograph pieces for her research check items after hours, always with reasonable explanations. "When did it escalate?" 6 months ago. Said the museum was concerned about theft rings. Asked me to temporarily move high-value pieces to secure locations, including your shop, until better security was installed. And you believed her. She had documentation, Dad. Official papers calls with supposed board members. She'd created entire false reality around me. His voice broke. I thought I was protecting art. Instead, I was stealing it. You were protecting what you loved. She used that against you. We pulled into our driveway. Derek stared at the house where Kira had lived and lied 2 years. How did you see through her when I couldn't? Experience? 40 years dealing with con artists, thieves who thought they could fool the old antique dealer. I turned off the engine, but mostly I knew my son. You weren't capable of what they accused you of. I feel like such a fool. You learned an expensive lesson about trust. Question is, what now? Derek looked at me hopefully. What do you mean? The shop needs rebuilding. Windows replaced, inventory, reorganized, reputation restored. I could use a partner who understands both antiques and museums. You'd want me to work with you after everything. Derek, you're my son. More than that, you're a good man who trusted the wrong woman. If I can't forgive that, what kind of father am I? That evening we planned. Derek would continue at Charleston Heritage Museum. They'd offered his job back with apologies. But evenings and weekends he'd help rebuild Brennan Antiques. We'll make it stronger than before. Derek said, sketching security improvements. We'll make it honest, I corrected. That's all it needs to be. A month later, Brennan Antiques reopened with new windows, better security, and a sign reading, Father and Son Est, 1984. Business was better than ever. Surviving international art theft conspiracy was good publicity. Derek was healing slowly, but surely. The museum promoted him to senior curator, and I'd learned 65 wasn't too old to be a hero when family needed saving. How do you trust again after something like this? Derek had asked. Carefully, thoughtfully. But you do trust because the alternative is living in fear. And you remember that wisdom comes from surviving times when trust was misplaced. Sometimes the greatest antiques aren't objects. Their wisdom passed through generations' bonds, holding families together. Knowledge that love and experience can overcome even elaborate deceptions. Looking back at my story, I realize how close I came to losing everything. Don't be like me. Don't wait until disaster strikes to truly see the people around you. I spent 2.5 years living with a criminal thinking I knew my family. The lesson I learned is simple: trust your instincts, especially when something feels too perfect. God gave us intuition for a reason, and I ignored mine for too long. When that beautiful woman swept into Derek's life with perfect timing, I should have asked harder questions. Grandpa stories like mine teach us that experience matters. Those gut feelings aren't paranoia, they're wisdom. This true story changed how I see family relationships. I realized that protecting someone sometimes means having difficult conversations. God blessed me with 65 years of experience, but I was afraid to use it because I didn't want to seem like an interfering old man. Don't make my mistake. When you sense deception, investigate. When someone tries to isolate your loved ones, speak up. God puts people in our lives to watch out for each other, and sometimes being the suspicious old grandpa is exactly what your family needs. Grandpa stories remind us that age brings perspective, not irrelevance. True story experiences teach us that love sometimes means being the one everyone thinks is wrong, until you're proven right. Grandpa stories show us that wisdom comes from surviving life's hardest lessons. This true story proved that family bonds can survive even the most elaborate deceptions. What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps us bring more meaningful stories to families everywhere.